He was a billionaire and ready to end it all. Then, a 70-year-old waitress reminded him why he was still alive. He had a private jet, 3 yachts, and a watch collection worth more than most neighborhoods. A lifestyle most people only dreamed of. Yet, at 28, Logan Foster was 36 hours from filing bankruptcy, his empire crumbling around him. He was one bad thought away from ending it all, teetering on the edge of an abyss. The last person on earth he expected to pull him back to offer a lifeline was a gray-haired waitress. She refilled his coffee with a smile that seemed to have survived everything. The Great Recession, profound widowhood, and 2 grueling bouts of cancer. In 20 minutes, she would hand him a receipt. It was just a small slip of paper, but it would fundamentally change everything he believed about losing, about quitting, and about the daunting yet exhilarating prospect of starting over. Logan's day began, if you could call it a beginning, in a Manhattan penthouse he no longer owned. The bank, swift and merciless, had auctioned it off the night before a final brutal gavel strike, echoing in the empty, expensive rooms of his memory. His flagship app, once the darling of Silicon Alley, a digital marvel valued at a dizzying $2.4 billion, was now hemorrhaging users faster than his frantic legal team could draft apology tweets. The whispers of its demise had grown into a roar, a digital death knell that reverberated through the tech world. The investors, those smiling faces who once hung on his every word, who had laughed a little too loudly at his mediocre jokes, now let their phones ring unanswered. Their silence was a deafening indictment. By noon, he'd sold his last liquid stock, a desperate, gut-wrenching move just to cover payroll for the few loyal employees who hadn't yet jumped ship. But it wasn't enough. The well was dry. By sunset, emotionally and financially depleted, he found himself standing outside a dusty, unassuming diner. It was off Interstate 80, far from the gleaming towers of his former life, chosen for one simple, heartbreaking reason. It was the only place he could think of with cheap coffee and, crucially, no Bloomberg screens screaming his spectacular failure back at him. Every headline, every stock ticker, every analyst's grim prediction felt like a personal assault, a public flogging. He needed an escape, a momentary reprieve from the relentless judgment. He slid into a cracked vinyl booth, the worn materials sighing beneath his weight, a silent testament to countless other weary souls who had sought refuge there. He pressed his forehead against the cold, grimy window pane, the faint chill a stark contrast to the burning shame within him. And there, in the fading light of a day that had stripped him bare, he whispered the words he swore he'd never utter, the ultimate capitulation: "I give up." It was a confession, a surrender, a final bitter acknowledgement of defeat. He felt hollow, empty, as if the very air had been sucked out of his lungs. The weight of his colossal failure pressed down on him, suffocating any last flicker of hope.
I give up.
He wasn't just broke. He was broken.
Are you okay?
He, Logan
Yeah, I just
Foster,
have a
the
lot on my
wunderkind, the visionary, the billionaire, was now just a man in a diner staring at the end of his world. The future, once a boundless horizon of possibility, had shrunk to a single terrifying point: nothing. Dolores McAllister. The name itself felt like a warm, familiar melody. She'd worked the same gleaming silver counter at the same diner since 1978. Think about that for a second. 1978. That's a lifetime for most people. Now 70 years young, her spirit certainly didn't feel a day over 30, even if her body sometimes disagreed. She wore support socks, a practical necessity, and a name tag that, if it could talk, would tell stories of 2,000 washes, each cycle fading its once bold lettering a little more. her hands gnarled by arthritis, curled like autumn leaves, a testament to years of tireless service. Yet despite the pain, despite the wear and tear, she balanced 4 plates laden with eggs, bacon, and toast without a single tremor. It was a ballet of practiced precision, a silent defiance against the march of time. She called every single customer sugar, not because her memory was failing, not because she couldn't remember a face or a name. Oh no, quite the opposite. It was a conscious choice, a philosophy born of experience. Kindness, she'd learned, was far cheaper than tips, and crucially it lasted a whole lot longer. A genuine smile, a warm word. Those were her currency, and they paid dividends in human connection. The moment Logan walked in, she spotted his 1,000-yard stare. It was a look she knew intimately, a silent scream of despair. She'd seen it in the mirror the night her beloved husband Frank passed away, leaving her with a void that still ached. She'd seen it the morning the doctor, with a gentle but firm voice, uttered the word malignant, a diagnosis that had shaken her to her core. And she saw it every single April, a recurring nightmare. When the property taxes came due, a stark reminder of the relentless financial tightrope she walked. She knew that look because she had worn it herself many times over. Without a word, without him even having to ask, she poured him a steaming cup of coffee, the rich aroma, a small comfort in his desolate world. Placing it gently before him, she leaned in slightly, her voice a soft, knowing murmur. "First one's on the house, sugar," she said, a small, reassuring smile playing on her lips. Then, with a twinkle in her eye, she added, "Second one's if you decide to stay alive." It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation, a challenge, a quiet, profound acknowledgement of his pain, coupled with an insistent nudge towards hope. She wasn't just serving coffee, she was serving a chance. Logan barely tasted the burger, a greasy, lukewarm offering that might as well have been sawdust. His mind was miles away, trapped in a digital maelstrom. His thumb almost instinctively scrolled through foreclosure headlines on his phone, each new story a fresh stab of anxiety, a reminder of what he'd lost, what he was about to lose. He kept scrolling, a desperate, futile act, until the battery died, plunging the screen into a merciful darkness. With nothing left to distract him, he stared at the grease forming intricate, swirling galaxies on his plate. Each miniature universe, a mirror to the chaos within his own mind. Dot returned a quiet presence, placing the check before him. It was a simple slip of paper, the total a modest $7.83, scribbled in her familiar looping hand. But it wasn't the number that caught his attention. On the back, in the same earnest script, she had written something else, something that stopped him cold. "You're still breathing, so the scoreboard's still tied." He blinked once, then twice, the words echoing in the sudden silence of his thoughts. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He was surprised, genuinely taken aback, that she'd noticed the tears he'd so carefully hidden behind his mirrored sunglasses, those expensive shields he'd used to project an image of invulnerability. But Dot, with her decades of observing human fragility, had seen right through them. Her simple sentence was a revelation, a quiet thunderclap in his storm-tossed mind. It wasn't about winning or losing, not truly. It was about showing up, about the sheer, stubborn fact of existence. A $100 bill, crumpled and forgotten in his wallet, found its way under the ketchup bottle. It was a gesture of gratitude, perhaps, or a silent acknowledgement of her profound insight. He didn't wait for change. He simply stood a little straighter than before and walked out of the diner, the receipt clutched in his hand. It wasn't just paper. It was contraband, a secret message, a small, fragile spark of something he hadn't felt in days, maybe even weeks. Hope. It was a reminder that the game wasn't
I will
over,
not be the
not
one
yet,
to go to my grave
not as long
with my
as he was
song
still in it.
unsung.
Dot wasn't supposed to be working Thursdays anymore. Her doctor, a kind but firm woman, had insisted. The swelling in her knees, a constant throbbing companion, needed elevation, not the relentless pounding of double shifts on hard diner floors. But life, as it often does, had a way of disregarding doctor's orders. Rent, that unyielding monthly foe, had jumped another $40, a seemingly small sum that for Dot felt like a mountain. And her pension, a meager trickle, stretched thinner than the diner's famously weak coffee. Every dollar counted, every shift mattered. So she laced up her worn-out Skechers, the soles offering little comfort against the unforgiving linoleum, and clocked in. As she moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, she hummed softly, a slightly off-key rendition of Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive." It was her anthem, her mantra. Attitude, she knew, was free, a powerful weapon against despair and music. Well, music was medicine, a balm for the weary soul. Between orders, in those brief stolen moments of respite, she'd scribble. On blank tickets, the kind usually reserved for customer orders, she'd jot down little life lessons, nuggets of hard-won wisdom. These weren't just random thoughts. They were fortune cookie insights, the kind of profound truths she wished someone had told her when she was a wide-eyed, hopeful 28. Pain is a teacher. Don't skip class, she'd write, remembering her own battles. Rock bottom is solid ground. Build there a testament to her own resilience after countless setbacks. She'd then slip these anonymous notes to customers who looked like they were drowning their eyes, holding the same distant, haunted look she'd recognized in Logan. Most never noticed them leaving the slips behind with their crumpled napkins and forgotten sugar packets. Logan, lost in his own world of despair, had almost tossed his away too, just another piece of diner ephemera. But something, a flicker of curiosity, a desperate need for something to cling to, had made him hold on to it. And that, as it turned out, made all the difference. All. The bankruptcy lawyers, sleek and predatory, had given Logan their standard advice: vanish. Offshore accounts, a quiet island, a fresh start. The usual playbook for the spectacularly fallen. It was a tempting escape, a chance to shed the skin of his failure and disappear. But something, a quiet insistence, a persistent hum in the back of his mind, kept him tethered. It was the waitress's note. Her simple, powerful words nagged at him louder than the shame, louder than the lawyer's cynical counsel. You're still breathing, so the scoreboard's still tied. It was a tiny seed of defiance planted in the fertile ground of his despair. 24 hours later, against all logic and his lawyer's vehement recommendations, he was back. Same
2
booth,
coffees,
the
please.
vinyl still cracked the scent of stale coffee and fried onions, a strangely comforting presence. Same sunglasses, still hiding eyes that were now unmistakably red, not just from lack of sleep, but from a quiet internal battle. He ordered 2 coffees. One for the cup, he told himself, a familiar ritual. The other, he realized, was for the company, for the unspoken connection he felt to this place, to this woman. When Dot approached her smile as steady as the morning sun, she asked Sugar, "You visiting or staying?" Her question, casual as it seemed, cut right to the core of his predicament. It wasn't about the diner. It was about his life. And he, Logan Foster, the man who always had a plan, a strategy, a definitive answer for everything, found himself surprised by his own response. "I don't know yet." He mumbled the words, feeling foreign on his tongue. It was a confession of uncertainty, a raw admission of his aimlessness. She didn't press. She just smiled, that enduring smile of hers. It was a smile that had outlived, disco-weathered countless recessions, and seen her through rationed insulin. Well, she said, her voice a gentle balm, the menu's the same, take it or leave it, but quitting tastes bitter going down. It was a simple truth, delivered without judgment, without pressure, just a quiet, undeniable fact. And in that moment, Logan understood. This wasn't just a diner, it was a sanctuary. And Dot wasn't just a waitress. She was a guide offering not directions but a compass. He hadn't found all the answers, but he had found a place to start looking. The breakfast rush was a whirlwind, a chaotic ballet of clattering plates, sizzling bacon, and the constant hiss of the coffee machine. Dot moved through it all with practiced grace, a living testament to decades of muscle memory. Between refill rounds, between barking orders to the cook and wiping down sticky tables, she told him pieces of her story. Not a grand sweeping narrative, but fragmented truths, glimpses into a life lived with both immense joy and profound sorrow. At 30, she'd lost her first baby, a tiny life she'd barely had a chance to hold. The grief, she explained, was a physical thing, a crushing weight that never truly lifted, only transformed. At 45, her second husband, a quiet, steady man who loved her fiercely, was gone too, leaving her a widow again, the silence in her small home deafening. At 58, the bank took her house, the place where she'd raised her children, where she'd built a life. The eviction notice, stark and unforgiving, had felt like a final insult. She worked doubles, sometimes triples, through chemo treatments, her body ravaged, but her spirit unyielding. Why? Because sick days were unpaid and the bills didn't care about her pain. "You think I wanted to be here?" She'd scoff, gesturing vaguely at the bustling diner. "No sugar, but wanting doesn't pay the rent. Getting up and doing it, that does." When Logan, humbled and raw, mumbled, "I can't rebuild," the words catching in his throat, she stopped, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that brooked no argument. She lifted the sleeve of her uniform, revealing a faint silvery scar that snaked across her wrist. "I was flatlined 7 minutes, Logan," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, almost matter-of-fact. 7 minutes. They brought me back. And you know what I learned?" She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "Rebuilding is what the living do. It's not an option, sugar. It's a privilege." Her words weren't a platitude. They were a battle cry, a testament to the raw, visceral will to survive, to keep fighting no matter how many times life knocked you down. And for Logan, who had felt utterly dead inside her story, was a jolt, a shocking reminder of the sheer tenacity of the human spirit. Logan never bragged about his billions to Dot. He didn't have to. She never asked, never once hinted at the staggering wealth he once commanded. She saw only a man stripped bare of his defenses who needed tomorrow to matter, not a titan of industry, but a human being grappling with profound loss. And in her presence, surrounded by the comforting, mundane rhythm of the diner, he found himself shedding the layers of his former identity, one painful, uncomfortable revelation at a time. She challenged him not with grand pronouncements, but with simple, almost childlike tasks. "Stack these napkins, sugar," she'd say, placing a fresh pile before him. "One for every day you'll keep fighting. Just one, then another. See what happens." At first, he resisted, finding the task trivial, even insulting. He was a billionaire, for crying out loud, not a busboy. But the quiet insistence in her eyes, the gentle pressure of her presence, made him comply. He stacked them awkwardly at first, then with more purpose. 1 napkin, then 2, then 3. Each one a tiny commitment, a small act of defiance against the overwhelming urge to give up. By closing time, after hours of quiet conversation, punctuated by the clatter of dishes and the rhythmic wiping of counters, A wobbly tower stood on the table, 36 napkins high, one for each hour until his dreaded creditor meeting a meeting he had been convinced would be his final public humiliation. He stared at it, a fragile monument to his nascent resolve. It wasn't about the height or the perfection of the stack. It was about the intention behind each placement. It was about realizing that survival, that the very act of rebuilding could be measured in such tiny increments, in inches, in moments, in a single, perfectly balanced napkin. It was a tangible representation of a future he was slowly, tentatively beginning to reclaim. He wasn't just stacking napkins. He was stacking days, stacking hope, one fragile piece at a time. That night, the digital world delivered another crushing blow. Hackers, opportunistic and merciless, erased Logan's remaining user base. Not a slow decline this time, but a complete obliteration. The news cycles, ever hungry for drama, pounced. Headlines screamed, branding him the unicorn that imploded, a spectacular failure, a cautionary tale for the ages. His phone, once a source of constant connection and validation, buzzed incessantly, not with offers or opportunities, but with anonymous venom digital jeers from the faceless masses. Each notification was a fresh wound, a reminder of his public disgrace. He drove aimlessly, at first the city lights blurring into an indifferent smear. He drove until the gas light blinked a stark warning, mirroring the emptiness in his own tank. And then, through the oppressive darkness, he saw it Dot's Diner. It glowed like a lighthouse, a solitary beacon in a storm of despair, its neon sign a comforting, anachronistic warmth. She was there just as he knew she would be, mopping the floors, her movement slow but steady, singing off-key to a jukebox that had been unplugged decades earlier. The melody, a forgotten tune from her youth, was a quiet act of rebellion against the silence. He sat defeated, slumping into their usual booth, the weight of the day's catastrophe pressing down on him. He didn't need to speak. Dot just looked at him, her eyes soft with understanding. "Sugar," she said, her voice cutting through his despair like a warm knife through butter. "The night looks darkest just above a lit kitchen. You're in the shadows right now, but there's light in here. Stay here till sunrise." It wasn't an order. It was an invitation to stillness, to refuge, an offer of simple, unwavering presence. She understood that sometimes the only way to survive the storm was to find a quiet place to weather it, to wait for the first faint streaks of dawn. And in that moment, surrounded by the comforting, familiar scent of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, Logan felt a strange, fragile sense of peace. He wasn't alone. They talked, or rather Dot talked, and Logan listened until 5 a.m. The diner, usually bustling with the early morning rush, was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the gentle murmur of Dot's voice. She shared another secret, a practice she'd cultivated over decades, a simple yet profoundly transformative ritual: gratitude lists. Every single shift, she explained, before the first customer arrived, she'd take a blank guest check and write down 3 blessings, 3 things she was genuinely grateful for. Then, without a second thought, she'd rip it up, a symbolic act of release and renewal. "Keeps the mind right," she said, her eyes twinkling with a wisdom that transcended any textbook. "Reminds you what you actually have, not what you think you're missing." She offered him a pen, its cheap plastic feeling alien in his hand. He hesitated, his mind a blank. Gratitude for what he had lost. Everything. But her patient gaze urged him on. Slowly, painfully, he scribbled 3 words. Roof lungs, coffee. It felt pathetic. a paltry list compared to the grand pronouncements of his former life. He expected her to laugh, or at least to look disappointed. Instead, Dot nodded, a slow, deliberate movement as if he'd just struck gold. "Now you're mining," she said, her voice filled with quiet approval. And in that moment, something shifted within Logan. It wasn't a sudden dramatic epiphany, but a gentle reorientation, like a compass needle slowly finding true north. He realized that gratitude wasn't about the size of the blessing, but the act of acknowledging it. It wasn't about having everything. It was about appreciating anything. He had a roof over his head, even if it wasn't his penthouse. He had lungs that drew breath, even if he often felt suffocated. And he had coffee, a simple warm comfort offered by a woman who saw him not as a failure, but as someone still breathing still in the game. He wasn't just writing a list. He was beginning to excavate the buried treasures of his own existence, finding worth in the smallest, most fundamental things. Logan left that morning with no grand plan, no intricate strategy for a comeback worthy of a tech magazine cover. He had only the napkin tower promise, a silent vow to himself, one day at a time. He started small, almost imperceptibly. His first act, a gut-wrenching exercise in humility, was to email his laid-off employees, not with hollow promises, but with a genuine, heartfelt apology for the chaos he'd wrought, for the lives he'd disrupted. Then came the public apology, a carefully worded statement that broke through the PR speak of his past, admitting his mistakes, owning his failure. It was met with a cynical shrug from most of the media, but for Logan, it was a necessary cleansing, a step towards integrity. He sold his last remaining asset of significant value, his pristine custom-built sports car, not to pay off creditors, but to seed severance pools for those employees he had inadvertently left stranded. It was a fraction of what they deserved, but it was something, a tangible act of responsibility. Stockholders, those who still bothered to pay attention, jeered their vitriol, echoing the digital venom he'd endured. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, a few users began to return to his defunct app. Not because it was fixed, but because they were curious. Curious if a humbled App One whose creator had publicly admitted his flaws might finally listen better, might truly serve its community. Each night after navigating the treacherous waters of his new, uncertain reality, he drove back to the diner. It became his ritual, his anchor. He'd add one more napkin to the tower, a silent testament to another day endured, another battle fought. Dot, a steady, unwavering presence, would feed him soup, simple, nourishing broth that warmed him from the inside out. And she would tell him stories, not of grand triumphs, but of quiet resilience of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding a way through. Her narratives were a tapestry, woven with threads of hardship humor and an unshakable faith in the human spirit. With each story, each bowl of soup, each added napkin, Logan felt himself growing stronger, not just physically, but in a deeper, more profound way. He was learning to walk again, one small, deliberate step at a time. Week 3. The routine was set, a fragile rhythm of rebuilding, when life, with its cruel, unpredictable timing, struck again. Dot's knees, those long-suffering joints, finally buckled. It happened during the lunch rush, a sudden sharp pain that sent her crumpling to the floor plates, shattering around her. The diner fell silent, then erupted in a flurry of concern. Paramedics arrived, their sirens a jarring intrusion on the diner's familiar hum, and swiftly transported her to the county hospital, a sterile, impersonal place far removed from the warmth of her diner. Logan followed, a frantic shadow, his own heart pounding with a fear he hadn't realized he still possessed.
Oh my
In the
gosh, are
sterile,
you
fluorescent
okay?
halls, a new, devastating truth came to light. Tucked away in her worn leather purse, beneath a tangle of loose change and faded tissues, were not just her usual gratitude lists, but also a stack of eviction notices. She'd been hiding them under her apron, a silent, desperate secret. The diner, he realized with a sickening lurch, wasn't just her workplace. It was her last anchor, her only defense against utter destitution. He paced the linoleum floors, the cold, hard reality of her struggle, hitting him with the force of a physical blow. He, the former billionaire, the tech mogul, who had once believed he could solve any problem with an algorithm or an investment, felt utterly helpless. Billion-dollar apps hadn't saved her. His grand schemes had done nothing to alleviate the quiet, grinding poverty that had stalked her for years. A bitter, ironic thought surfaced. Maybe broke people can't fix broken people. Maybe his own struggles had blinded him to hers. Then his gaze fell upon her purse again, lying open on a nearby chair. He saw not just the eviction notices, but also a thick stack of unpaid medical bills, each one a stark reminder of her physical battles. And amidst the grim paperwork, he saw them dozens, hundreds, perhaps even thousands of gratitude lists dating back to 1982. Tiny slips of paper, each detailing 3 small blessings, a testament to a life lived in constant defiance of despair. He sat the cold plastic chair, doing little to comfort him, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, he cried. Not for himself, not for his lost empire, but for Dot, for her quiet suffering, for the immense burden she had carried with such grace. And in that moment, he understood. He understood debt, not just as a financial ledger, but as a profound human connection. He owed her more than money could ever repay. He owed her his life. Dot came home to an empty apartment, the silence a stark reminder of her solitary life. But then she noticed something different, a crisp envelope on her kitchen table. Inside, a letter from her landlord confirming that her rent was paid not just for the upcoming month, but for 6 months forward. The payment, it stated, was courtesy of an anonymous foundation newly formed by a grateful patron. She smiled a small, knowing smile. She knew. She didn't need a name or a grand reveal. She knew exactly who her grateful patron was. Logan. The man who had once built an empire on lines of code now used what remained of his fortune, the last vestiges of his once vast wealth, for a different kind of rebuilding. Not to resurrect his software, not to chase another IPO, but to rebuild lives, starting profoundly with hers. He didn't just pay her rent. He ensured she had access to better medical care, a proper physical therapist, the kind of support she had always deserved but could never afford. When reporters still sniffing around his story like vultures eventually tracked him down, asking about his sudden unexpected pivot into philanthropy, he offered no grand pronouncements, no self-serving speeches. "I'm not a philanthropist," he told them, his voice calm and resolute. "I'm a receipt collector." He offered no selfies, no curated press tours, no carefully crafted narratives for social media. Just that simple, powerful statement. And back at the diner, a new napkin tower stood taller now than the jukebox, a silent, ever-growing monument to a different kind of success, a success measured not in billions, but in quiet, meaningful acts of human connection. It was a testament to the belief that the most profound comebacks aren't always about reclaiming what was lost, but about discovering what truly matters. Dot, ever the pragmatist, returned to work as soon as her knees allowed. Idle hands, she'd often say, scared her more than aching joints. The diner was more than a job. It was her community, her purpose, the rhythm of her days. Logan, now a regular fixture in the booth near the window, asked her what she wanted, truly wanted. He expected a list of grand wishes, perhaps a retirement home, a world cruise. Instead, she laughed a genuine, hearty sound that filled the diner. A dishwasher that doesn't talk back, she quipped, her eyes twinkling. So he bought the whole place new equipment, a gleaming industrial-grade dishwasher that hummed quietly, efficiently. New ovens, new fryers, new coffee machines that brewed with a quiet dignity. But he had one condition, a playful but firm demand: she had to keep writing her notes on checks. She considered it for a moment, then nodded, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "All right, sugar," she agreed, picking up a pen. And to her existing repertoire of wisdom, she added a new line, a truth born of her recent experience, a testament to the profound reciprocity of kindness. Helping hands heal the helper too. It was a lesson Logan understood intimately now. In reaching out to save Dot, he had in turn saved himself. He had found a new purpose, a new way to measure his worth, not in the fluctuating tides of the stock market, but in the steady, unwavering beat of human connection. 6 months later, Logan's stripped-down app relaunched. No splashy IPO, no celebrity endorsements, no aggressive marketing campaigns. Just a quiet, focused rollout of a tool designed to help small diners, places exactly like Dot's, manage their orders, track inventory, and streamline their operations. It was humble, practical, and deeply rooted in a real-world need. It wasn't about disrupting an industry. It was about serving one. And to everyone's surprise, perhaps even Logan's, it worked. The app turned its first modest profit in month 4, a quiet victory that felt more significant than any billion-dollar valuation. Venture magazines, those same publications that had once lauded him as a genius and then condemned him as a failure, now called it the comeback that shouldn't exist. They couldn't quite grasp the shift, the fundamental change in his approach. But Logan knew. He credited Dot's receipt philosophy: fix what you broke, serve who you can refill coffee while you're at it. It was a simple, elegant business model built on empathy and genuine utility, not on hype and inflated valuations. He had learned that true innovation wasn't always about the next big thing, but sometimes it was about doing the small things consistently and with heart. His new company wasn't just profitable, it was purposeful, and that he realized was a far richer return. Dot still works Thursdays. Her knees still ache sometimes, a familiar companion. But the new equipment eases her burden, and the worry of eviction no longer hangs over her. She still calls every customer sugar, her voice a warm, unwavering comfort. And yes, sometimes, tucked beneath the register away from prying eyes, she still hides an unpaid bill or two. Old habits and the realities of life on a fixed income die hard. Logan still eats there often, in the same booth, a quiet presence. He still adds napkins to the ever-growing tower, a daily ritual, a silent promise to himself and to Dot. And he still lists 3 gratitudes every single morning, a practice that has fundamentally reshaped his perspective. The billionaire who once measured his worth in share price and market capitalization now measures it in unpaid dishes. Because dishes, he's learned, mean people were fed. They mean connection. They mean life. Their story never trended on social media. It didn't go viral. It didn't need to.
What time are you done?
It was a
Around
quiet
6.
triumph, a testament to resilience lived out in the unassuming rhythm of a small-town diner. The diner still smells like bacon, like second chances, and like coffee that, much like Dot and Logan themselves, never quits. It's a place where hope is served daily, a place where 2 unlikely souls found each other and in doing so found themselves anew. If Dot's sheer grit, her unwavering spirit, or Logan's incredible rebound reminded you that tomorrow is truly unwritten, that your story isn't over yet, then hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a napkin tower of their own, someone who's wrestling with their own scoreboard. Subscribe for more stories that prove hope isn't age-restricted, that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places. And hey, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments what's on your gratitude list today. What small blessings are you mining? A 70-year-old waitress, with hands gnarled by time and a heart refined by hardship, taught a 28-year-old billionaire a truth far more valuable than any stock portfolio. She showed him that bankruptcy is just a balance sheet, not a soul sheet. It's about numbers, not about who you are. She proved with every steady refill and every quiet word that quitting is entirely optional, a choice you make, but breathing is mandatory. And perhaps most profoundly, she showed him that coffee, especially when shared with someone who truly believes you'll survive the refill, simply tastes better. Tonight, somewhere a diner light is still on, casting a warm glow against the encroaching darkness. A scarred woman is mopping tiles, humming a tune only she can hear. And a former titan, now a man redefined, is quietly stacking napkins, one for each day he chooses to fight. Because they both learned the same timeless truth, a truth as simple and enduring as the diner itself, as long as the sign says, "Open you are too."